Good afternoon, a very warm welcome. My name's Emily Butler, I'm the curator of conversations here at Art Basel. We're really thrilled and honoured to have collaborated with the Liverpool Biennial today to present this panel. We will be looking at the concept of uMoya and the work of breathing with the Biennial's curator, Khanyisile Mbongwa, who comes fresh from its launch a few days ago. And she is joined by two of the Biennial artists, Nolan, Oswald and Belinda, Kazeem-Kamiński. We'll have time to ask some questions at the end of the panel, and I'll try and relay some from our online audiences. But before I hand over to Khanyisile, please do give Nolan and Belinda and Khanyisile a very warm round of applause.
Thokozani, mna ndingumbongo ugadula umbuyisa unyamazana kamthimkhulu, ndingukhumalo umntungu umbulasi wadla umuntu emyenga ngendaba, ndingumadondo umwelasi uqude nothukela umnquhe, ndingumabaso ubasentabeni kudliwe ilanga selishona, camagushane, ndingujola, amampondomise amahle, ndingumbathane, ndingumgcina, ndingutshathu, ndiyathokozisa abakwasithole, ndithokozisa abakwahlophe, omthandi, omtshali, ngisithi aye ndawo ndawo aye ndawo ndawo aye. Welcome to uMoya, the Cosmology of Breath. To breathe is a political act, an urgent engagement of cosmological forces. This talk coincides with the anniversary of the Soweto uprising, June 16, 1976, a series of demonstrations and protests against apartheid in South Africa, led by black high school students that were ambushed, tear-gassed, shot at, and killed by police forces using tactics which are increasingly being used around the world today. In this conversation, we reflect on demonstration, protests, and other acts of resistance to the work of breathing and cosmology. And we ask, how do we continue to breathe in the knowledge of breathlessness? Today, I welcome Belinda and Nolan, who I've been working with for a while, towards the biennial. I will stand to introduce you. Belinda Kazeem-Kamiński, the Yoruba nation, the womb of the lineage of the Orishas, who crossed the waters in Brazil, Cuba to attend our ancestors. The craftspeople of blacksmithing, the weavers, the glassmakers, carvers of ivory and wood. You hear their hands in the dun-dun drum, calling, wailing, responding, vibrating. Olupomi Adeola, Olupomi Adeola, given from God, little princess, daughter of Grace, Modupe, Bantu, and Oladupe Kazeem, who descend from the Ondo state, who then crossed the sub-savanna, the forest, and over the water. Bantu and Kazeem made way to Vienna, towards their dreams deferred, giving birth to Olabumi Adeola, Olabumi Adeola, entrusting Maria and Herbert Strupreiter with their given from God little princess. We call her Belinda, the one who reminds us of breathing, who calls us towards black breath and black breathing, Inhale and exhale, the curbing of agony. Respire. Thokozani, Belinda.
Thokoza.
Thokozani, Nolan Oswald Dennis, is a child of many lineages, the eldest son of Hilton and Thokozile Dennis, who started their family exiled from their homes for their roles in the fight for land and dignity in apartheid South Africa. Nolan is born in Lusaka, Zambia, and carries that landscape and the community of South African exiles, freedom fighters, who were sheltered and supported in life and death by the land and the people of Angola, Tanzania, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana, Lesotho, Cuba, the former Soviet Union, the former Yugoslavia, and so many more are a part of their lineage. These places, alongside Umlazi, Gqotshe, Iqhopho, and Midrand, are part of their ancestry. The Dennises Yakwalusikisiki, who were scattered across the land and almost lost. The Frankinsons Yakwa-Wataza, who chose to surrender their name and their names and name themselves again. Izingane zika Frank nomamkhize. Ujoyisa, who hides in our memory as Joyce. Siyathokozisa. Omthembu, Omwelase, Oqudeni. Ovele enyandeni yemkhonto yakwamabaso, Velase kaGuda. Siyathokozisa.
Thokoza.
Yeah, we chose to introduce each other, or to introduce each other through our ancestral lineage to honor our ancestors, because the reason we're here is because they dare to dream in states of duress.
Just keep it up. Keep on keeping
Yeah, thank you very much. Is it okay like this? Okay. Can you hear us? Is it okay like this? Yeah? Okay, good. Thank you. I think I would like to start with one quote out of a text by Jessica Cox and Isaac Jean-François. Listening to black breathing is to listen to the fear that it might be stopped at any time by the police, pollution, stress resulting from racialization, heterosexism, classism, the list goes on. It is listening to something that is not supposed to be free and unbound. So I think maybe I'll take this quote as a begin to try to tell you about this piece and why I did it, how it was inspired. So what you saw now is like maybe a little bit out of what you can see in Liverpool. I find it challenging to show a 3D kind of work that is installed in a space and consists of 6 screens, 6 speakers, and a bench object with a bowl that is also full of water that moves to show that in this thing. But I hope from the sound that you heard that you can get an idea. So what I'm showing in Liverpool consists of the piece Respire. Respire Liverpool. It was conceptualized or done together with people living in Liverpool from the black community of Liverpool, and I'm very, very grateful to all of them for sharing a very intimate but also very ordinary force, our breath. It's not that often that we share breath or consciously share breath, because we are also sharing breath here now. But to kind of make the decision to listen to each other's breath, to tend to each other's breath, to give each other's breath space. I think this is what this piece tries to do. It tries to think about something that is very precarious, black breath, as I just read in this quote, and to give this a space and to also take it, our breathing in and out, as the beginning of thinking towards liberation. So how did I come to this idea? I think it came out of 2 other works that I did. One video that is called Flashbacks, which is kind of a 3-part short thingy that thinks about the memories of a so-called human zoo in Vienna in the 19th century and the remnants of it. And in the piece, I didn't consciously do that, but when looking at it now, I see that breath is very central in this piece already, and that breath is used as this force that kind of connects the here and now, but also the different times. And taking this together with another work that I did that is a photography work, a 3-part photography work that is called In Search of Red, Black, and Green, where you see a person that kind of looks at the red textile, at a black one, and at the green one. I think this is coming together in Liverpool. So here you can see stills from openings. This is green, of course. So this is also on 3 screens, and all of this is running together. So openings brings in my kind of wanting to think about Pan-Africanism and what Pan-Africanism and their thinking about liberation still means to us today, what we can learn today from Pan-Africanism. This comes from me being, I see myself as a kind of student also of Pan-Africanism, and also it works against what I often see, this tendency of Columbusing, where we always think that we have to kind of, we are the first ones to think something, or we have to invent the wheel. And I would rather like to suggest to look at all these liberation movements that have taken place and to see what it is that we can learn from them, what we can adapt, how we can maybe update in a way. Because I think that breath and liberation are really intertwined. Just on a very practical level, where can I breathe freely? I mean, it's like, I think the peak of it is a slogan like, I can't breathe, no? That's the peak of it. But there are so many subtle ways in which breath and liberation is connected. So what I wanted to create for Liverpool was really this space that starts with Black breath, that is dedicated to Black breath, and that invites people to witness and to be with, what I call witness. Black breath, that as the center. So, yeah, what I hope is that by watching other people breathe, one can also attend to their own breath. And this is especially, of course, dedicated to Black people that often don't have the space to breathe freely, as I also write in this short text for the exhibition. So, working on this project has been wonderful, working with this community who were willing to share also their relation to breathing. I worked especially with people who also work with their breath, as activists, as radio hosts, as actors, in all different capacities. I myself, during this time, did my teacher training for a breath practitioner. So it's not only something that I like to think about like on a theoretical level, but also really as a bodily practice. Because I think maybe one thing that we could update to all these liberation movements would be to really think about the relation between our bodies and liberation. I think there are a lot of concepts that we carry here, but I think what I would like to kind of suggest is to really start with the body and start with this very simple thing of breathing in and out. Yeah, maybe I stop it here.
Wow. Hi. There's so many possible entries. But as you were talking, I was thinking about how I felt when Khanyisile reached out and invited me to the Liverpool Biennial and asked for this work in particular. And I was a little bit surprised by the choice in this context of healing. This work is called No Conciliation is Possible. And the title comes from a line in Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. I'll just read it. It goes, "The zone where natives live is not complementary to the zone inhabited by the settlers. The two zones are opposed, but not in the service of a higher unity. No conciliation is possible, for of the two terms, one is superfluous." This is a very difficult passage, and it's a very difficult proposition to think through. And the work in its ongoing, labored, ongoing life is my sharing of this thinking, of this kind of struggling with this question, which for me, of course, is something I would think of as a kind of a healing process. It's the work I'm trying to do to overcome the spaces I find myself in. And I was always kind of curious about the choice of this work in this context, taken to Liverpool with its history, placed in a framework which is trying to allow Liverpool to do a certain kind of work, maybe analogous to this, but maybe in Fanon's terms, not complementary. But during the opening, Khanyisile spoke a lot. Bless. And in hearing, listening but hearing, Khanyisile, this, how to say it, like the significance of what all of the work is trying to do in Liverpool started to make sense to me. And there's one thing that Khanyisile said, just in passing, that has stuck with me. And in my own way, I've kind of added a third term, because at the moment I'm a little bit obsessed with triangles. But Khanyisile spoke about the wound of the water and the wound of the land. And I won't attempt to describe what that means to you, but in this preparing and thinking about this moment, I started thinking about this third site of wounding, the wound of the air. And so I don't really know exactly what the parameters are of such a potential wound, but I think Belinda's work helps me to understand where to go to find it. We're also sitting here on the anniversary of June 16, the 47th year anniversary of June 16, a set of protests, student uprisings that are so intimately tied, or a set of protests in which breath is so intimately at play. The use of tear gas, the running of the students, this kind of intensely physical. Anybody who knows anything about protests knows that protests are intensely physical, but South African protests are doubly physical, or could say Southern African protests are doubly physical because our bodies are mobilized in particular ways. We move, we sing, we dance. And so in all of this, there's this, in my mind, there's some kind of cloud of significance, which is maybe a way to say that this work, or to help share what this work does for me. This work, the title is No Conciliation is Possible, but in parentheses is working diagram, and it's a working diagram. It's constantly undergoing revisions. The images that you see are from various iterations that have been happening all over, like in different countries and different places, but it's kind of important to the work to think about, or in some ways the work denies a direct spatiality. It tries to imagine or invest in a kind of zonal space, which has to do with thinking about, kind of come full circle, cosmologies and ordering and orienting or orientation systems. And of course, all orientation systems are also, at least if you understand the world from my perspective or from our perspective, from a black perspective, from an African perspective, ordering systems are also primarily disordering systems, or you could say like orientation systems have a disorienting function. Part of what they do is make certain relations illegible. And this work, for me, is a very slow and sometimes painful process of trying to reveal to myself the connections between things I feel and things that I know. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say I wanted to say something about a good friend of mine, Suguma Mkhize. Or maybe I should say there are two people I want to mention. Vulani Mtembu, who composed the sound that we spent a minute listening to in the beginning. That in some ways is a minute for protests and for those lost in protests in general, but also in particular 47 years ago today. But also Suguma Mkhize, who's a young black South African astrophysicist from Umlazi, Durban. And he says that as he studied the sky, which is, I would say, a zone of air and airlessness, he has always had to go to privileged sites, observatories, universities, telescopes that are on mountaintops. And at some point he came home and he realized that the sky has no center, and that wherever you are is a meaningful site to think and to look and to observe the cosmos, let's say. And I would say that is a protest.
Thank you, Belinda and Nolan. I'm just going to ask two questions, and then I'll allow you to ask questions. Oh, no, not allow. Open up the space so questions can be asked. Yeah, I don't own your voices. Oof, that was a close one. Yeah, thank you both. I really love your work for many reasons. One of the reasons is because I think both of your works have this attending to the black dead, dying and alive, but it also attempts to hold us with tenderness, even though there are some moments where it feels like there are impossibilities to hold the black breath. We've spoken about this at length, or to figure out how we situate ourselves in the cosmos. So as your work reflects on demonstrations and these protests and other acts of resistance, I am interested in how your work examines the life force of uMoya as speed of light, of running feet, of bullets in the air, of sound wailing, of breath hissing and gasping. How, for you, Nolan, how using cosmology to account for forms of recovery and staying in black breath and which applies to you too, Belinda, can you both sort of speak about the intimacy and precarity from your practices as artists and black world makers? Because I think, I think it's factual. The world is made, for whiteness and ordered in, to privilege whiteness. How does black world making function in your practices in the intimacy of it and the precarity?
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Nolan. Kind. sweet. Let me answer like this. I mean, I think one work that I didn't mention, but that you all heard, is the audio track that is moving in the space, and it's called Keep On Keeping On. Some of you might know the title. It's a rendition of Curtis Mayfield's song, but it's nothing like Curtis Mayfield. But I was given this song as a metaphor by someone really dear to me, Nicolas Laureat Samurai, who has repeatedly introduced this song to me, and I think one day it stuck as a metaphor to think about blackness. Keep on keeping on. And to me, blackness is exactly this, to keep on keeping on despite. And it's like this insistence, you know? It's something that runs counter to what is and what is given, but it cannot be contained. That's not all of that, no? And it's this insistence and refusal to keep on keeping on. And that's what I hold on to. Yeah, maybe as a side note, the sound was created together with Bassano Bonelli Bassano, who I also want to thank. It's very important for me. It's a collaboration that has been going on. Yeah, but to your question, I think I'm thinking of Christina Sharp, no, who writes this in The Wake on Blackness and Being, the aspiration to keep breath in the black body. And I think this to me is such a strong thought that kind of activates me. And I want to tend to this. I also want to understand my life and what I experience from this perspective. And I want to make life from this perspective, because I think that this perspective can teach a lot about this, what could be beyond this systems of whiteness, no? What is contained when we just attend, for example, to our breath, and when we center our breath, and when we try to be with each other when we breathe, and take this as a starting point of activation. I hope I answered your question, but that's all the thoughts that I have. Yeah.
Thank you, Belinda. Nolan?
It's like an unanswerable question. I think I remember this kind of formulation from Shay Gossett, who's a queer theorist, and I think they got it from Ruth Wilson Gilmore. But it says something like, it goes something like, the colonial world is what happens when you treat a planet like property. And the black world is the movement against property. And this is related to black history of being property, being enslaved people. And this dynamic, I think you even see it in like the Public Enemy album, Fear of a Black Planet. I think this dynamic between the world that we have with its boundaries and its thresholds and its horizons and the world that we bring is really like, this relationship I think is the one of the kind of driving forces in my work. And so this idea of like incommensurability, or like not the irreconcilability of these two worlds is not just, even though it is partly a product of anger and pain, it's also a real, there's a real like impossibility to be an African person in a world which was built on seeing African people as not people, you know? We can't combine these two things. And so, I mean, I don't really know where this is going, but I think it's really important for me, to approach being an African and blackness through the history of what it's meant to look like us, to be from where we're from, and to relate to people, in particular people from Europe and people from North America, but in general, people who are not subject to those same conditions. It's important for me to think through that history and then to understand how, in spite of this kind of overwhelming and very frustrating horizon, we've been able to move in ways that are way beyond the kind of the systems of accounting, you know? Yeah, like black consciousness is important to know that blackness is not from the outside. It's not what they imposed on us, but it's what we do every single day, you know?
Okay, thank you both. Actually, I'm going to open for us to be in dialogue. I'm going to open to the floor and not make any comments. Does anyone have a question?
Hi, thank you all. I just have a question around, in kind of my own thinking, my own practice, I've always explored the relationship between breath and words. And Belinda, I wanted to ask kind of what your thinking is on the relationship between breath and words, or breath and wordlessness in terms of your work.
Breath and?
Words.
Words.
And wordlessness.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I need a minute. I'll admit I'm thinking. We could also collect another thing. Otherwise, I have to do live thinking. I don't know if that is that interesting, but I could try. I mean, there's no other urgent question. I think with this one, I was really trying to more go into vibration than words. Yeah. So I think the only thing that really stayed with me was this keep on keeping on, because I really use it as this metaphor, but also as a I love this kind of things that are a bit like a nod or a code. So you know that I know that this might be a Curtis Mayfield thing. So that's why I think the keep on keeping on stayed. But other than that, I was more focusing on humming and vibrations that start once you start to breathe consciously, and how you feel the zzz in your teeth and how you can make your teeth rattle by only breathing. I was more interested in that, to turn breath into water. I mean, you spoke about, I mean, that's Liverpool, no? We worked in Liverpool, and water is very strong there. Also, the wind is very strong there, and the rain is very strong there. I was there in January, and no shame on Liverpool, but the weather is not acceptable, in my opinion. But at least in January. The opening was great. So we have also worked a lot with all these sounds in a space, and then it was very important for us to also have the, like Bonelli Bassano did these recording sessions also with the performance. So all of them were basically working with Bassano for an hour to see what comes out once they start to breathe consciously. And this sounds, moans, hums, everything came out and was recorded and turned into that. Yeah, so that would be my answer. But I think, when I think about my practice of writing, I would say that it has also changed with consciously breathing. that now as I take writing as a starting point, when I start as I take breathing as a starting point, when I start to write, it kind of makes way for words also. Yeah. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for your two beautiful descriptions of your works. I had a question actually perhaps more for Khanyisile. I was wondering, you've spoken about the individual works, but I was wondering about the relation of the works perhaps to the space and how that might also amplify this idea of making space for breathing, and if you could talk a bit more about the context of where these works were shown.
I was hoping not to get any questions, actually. So, Emily. Yeah, like Liverpool is interesting is the wrong word, fascinating city. The choreography and the architecture that creates the choreography of how one can move in the city is completely and utterly immersed in this colonial and enslavement history that if you live in Liverpool, you know, you become blind to it, right? And so when I was processing and doing studio visits, I was thinking a lot about where I was and listening to the city. Like my practice as a curator, I listen. I don't go into a place already knowing what I'm going to do. So I had to listen a lot to Liverpool. I had to listen to how the wind lands on my body and on my bones, and what is the somatic response to that, what my ancestors were whispering to me, and what the ancestors of the place were whispering to me, right? So that was one layer. And then the second layer was like, how do I co-create space for the works that the artists are bringing in such a way that the works do the work they need to do, they intend to do in the space, and not have to negotiate the social politics of the institution. So for me, that's quite important. Like, how do I care and create the space for a curing to happen? So with Belinda, and curing, in a practical way when you're curating also has to do with technical, the building. Can the institution hold Belinda's work? And for Belinda, it was fact. Because fact is the most, in Liverpool, Liverpool is the most technologically equipped to hold Belinda's work because it required a lot of sort of advanced technology. And I wanted it to be in a place where once we have had the communication with the partner, they take care of Belinda's technical needs. But also to think about what Belinda needed for the work to do what it wanted to do. And, she needed a meditative space, a space where people can enter and sit with Black breath. And so that was another component to consider, what kind of orientation should the space be? And that was the other part of the negotiation. With Nolan's work, it sits within Tate in a conversation with other works, with the works of Tokwase Dyson, with the works of Fatima Rodrigo Gonzalez, with the works of Guadalupe Maravilla, Edgar Kalel, Isato Rosario, Pamela Sandstrom, Lubaina Himid, Gala. I need to mention everyone now. I'm like, yo. But sits in this conversation that attends, these works that attend to the wound and usher us into a possibility of healing. What would healing look like when we enter the site of the woundedness? Tate is a typical example in this timeline of what a colonial wound looks like as in an institutional format. Philanthropy, like Tate was started as a philanthropy, that history. And what does philanthropy actually mean in what right now is being described a decolonial, post-colonial world, which for me, still holds the colonial as the center of the breathing space of how institutions imagine themselves in the West. And so what does it mean to put Nolan's work that is mapping and recording and tracing, using words and lines and symbols and forms and books and objects as this very intimate, delicate moment of this word, when we break it down, this is how it lands on the body. So thinking about that and the conversation it would have with the other works. I could go on about the other works, but I don't want to take time to do that because, yeah, artists. But yeah, I hope that, yeah. Is there another question? This is good.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. My question is for Nolan. Nolan, you had said that you were obsessed with triangles. I'm very curious why. If you want to share.
Why?
Yes, just if there was, when somebody says that, it triggers me to ask the question, why triangles?
Maybe I can give you like highlights of triangles. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. I guess I've always been interested in like double and repetition, and the third axis kind of troubles the double. Triangles are also really maybe like overly present in the history of trade. So part of the Liverpool work that you didn't see here was a kind of triangular, say like a meditation on triangles. Of course, the preeminent trade triangle is the Africa, Americas, Europe colonial trade. It's kind of the source of so much of the wealth in this part of the world, source of so much of the deprivation in other parts of the world, source of so much of the chaos in other parts of the world. And but that triangle is like it's almost like a kind of ideal shape, which is repeated over and over and over and over again. And the Trinity is also, Trinity is a very sacred shape. It's a very stable shape. It's the pyramid. It's a structurally sound shape. I think all of these things are, in the way that I think, connected. And part of the work, to use Khanyisile's language, that I've been tasked with for some reason is to not discard connections, you know? So all of these endless triangles, it feels like it's my, one of the driving aspects of my practice is to not take any for granted, to not decide that any are less relevant than others, and rather find like what their co-constituting shape is, which is probably not a triangle, because there's more than 3 triangles in my life right now. So, yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, I'll ask since Belinda, yes, you. You spoke earlier about breath as inspiration and aspiration, like thinking about Christina Sharp. And in one of our conversations, we had spoken about the capacity of our lungs to expand and contract as signaling our aliveness. Can you speak to this, and also like your collaboration with people, like, because in thinking about what you call breath gatherers, can you speak about that, like black breath gatherers, and this, you know, our capacity to breathe, and historically as well, like these instances in this timeline, in the timeline before ours, where black breath is disturbed, disrupted, disorientated. Yeah.
Okay, so when, for example, looking at the history of enslavement, you can learn a lot about European or Western medicine also, no? Enslaved people were also used as these guinea pigs. So there was this thinking about the lungs of black people, that basically there was this thinking that black people don't feel as much pain, so that's why it's also okay to do whatever you do, and also that their lungs are working way differently, no? So you could just do all these things to them. So thinking about Black people's lungs and capacity to breathe was also very central in the times of enslavement. And I think this is it's still a given, no? When we look also on pollution, where in the Western world, for example, these places where people live close to hazardous environments, and who suffer the most here? It's often Black people and people of color, and not white people, no? Christina also spoke about this, no? About this one girl, I think in the UK, whose mother fought to make known, or she's like the first one, no? Who, the reason for death was really air pollution, no? And her mother fought for that, so that this was acknowledged. So taking this history, that is something, you were also saying that you take this as a starting point, no? It's very important for me to know, I mean, it might sound naive, but the question of, okay, why are Black people seen as they are seen, no? So this brings you back to this history, and I cannot forget it. But I also don't want to look at Blackness only through this lens, because I think that Black people have shown that there's always this despite and more than. Okay. So then, as a person that really tries to breathe daily as a practice, I find these moments that are neither breathing in nor breathing out very interesting. This moment of doing nothing, of like just sitting in whatever you want to call this. And I'm interested in this moment and what this moment does with us, because I find that this moment can like really take you somewhere else. And working with the breath gatherers, why I call them breath gatherers, yes, I think they gather breath not only for them individually, but also for another. So it's interesting that you talked about triangles, no? Because I think in my space there are a lot of triangles. So there are these big hanging screens where you see the people blowing in, blowing out of the balloon. They form a triangle. And then you also see the openings that are standing. They also form a triangle. And the bench also forms this triangle. So it's like, yeah. So what I wanted to create is a space in which basically you are witnessing a rehearsal of a chorus of breath gatherers. So they are breathing individually, but also breathing together, creating air, creating force, creating energy. And I think one thing that people have repeatedly said to me is that when you watch another person breathing like that, you become very aware of your own breath. And while you're trying to match it, you can't really, because your breath follows another rhythm. So we all have our own temporalities, but what would it mean to breathe together and to give each other this space to expand, no? So that was what we were trying to do here. And I think it was interesting to me that they were very open to that idea. I think maybe a year ago, I wouldn't have been that open myself if someone had said, okay, come on, can you breathe with me? But they were very, very open to that idea because they understood how important it is, especially for us as racialized people, to really attend to our breath and to try to expand our lungs and to train them and to do that. And yeah, to take that serious as a moment of expansion. Yeah.
Thank you, Belinda. Okay, anyone has a question? Oh, Emily.
This is a question from the live chat. I guess you've addressed it perhaps a little bit just now, Belinda, but it was a question about your collaboration with the community and performers in the Liverpool Biennial. How did this come about? And what does it mean to you to collaborate with performers in your works?
Yeah. I think I'm very lucky And Christina Sharp writes in my upcoming catalog, she writes that my practice is a practice of gathering. And Nicolas L'Oréal writes that my practice is a sonic practice. And I think with this project, both of these aspects came together. So for me, it was clear that I wanted to work with people based in Liverpool. I am a person that is really aware of being an artist. You come into a community for a project, for a short term, you make all these deep connections and then you're gone. And I really didn't want to do that. But at the same time, I mean, you just have to also be realistic about the time frame that you are given. So in January, I came to Liverpool. The Liverpool Biennial team has very, just perfectly arranged everything for me to meet people. Also before that, already online, I met Jennifer White, who has founded the Complaint Choir, Liverpool. So she told a lot of people about the project, and then we had 2 online meetings basically. They were announced, they were shared by the community, and people were invited. So whoever wanted to come was able to come online. I talked about the project that I had done in Graz, because I had done a kind of a rehearsal of this project already. We made a breathing exercise together. I played some tracks for them to get an idea, and then people were invited to register if they wanted. So this is how the group formed. And then we met again for the filming, for the recording also. And I would really say that there was a bond formed in a way, no? And it was also very important for me to share the work first with the performers, because this is a kind of work that doesn't exist without performers, no? I might be the one who gathers, but I'm not doing this work. For this kind of work, it takes a village, basically. So that's why my credits list is also very long. That's how we started to work with each other. And then it was so wonderful for me to see the performers in the space and watch them while they were watching themselves in this video, and also to see what this work has done to them, and to then also what we did before the opening was also to do another breathing exercise where we hummed and sang in the space to kind of make this space also ours. And I think that to me was like my unofficial opening. That's how it came about.
Thank you, Belinda. I'm going to ask one question from Nolan, and then we're running out of time. Okay. Cosmology is mapping. As record keeping, as tracing, orientation, as genealogy, umlibo, as lineage. There's an interesting conversation we had right at the beginning when I was still doing studio visits, and you were one of the artists I was talking to, and you said to me, and I still remember it, the politics of transformation are a misrecognition and a misdiagnosis. Can you go a layer deeper into that and your sort of cosmological configuration, purpose, and intention? And then that would be like a way to end our conversation around uMoya, the cosmology of Black breath.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I don't think I can do all that. I'll just say something like this relationship between order and disorder, accounting and unaccountability, recognition and misrecognition is really important to my understanding of the world and how we navigate it, and how we navigate a world in which so little is possible. How do we navigate an impossibility? And I think I would give like this forum as an example of maybe the potential generative power of misrecognition. I'm not really sure what we're doing here right now, but I'm pretty sure that it's not what's advertised on the board, you know? There's something that's happening here that's completely legible. We've come to an art fair to have a talk about African spiritual relations to the world and black breath and all of this. That's one level. But I think there must be something else more interesting happening that makes this space more interesting or fascinating, which is kind of pulling us all to the space. And so this relationship between like the world that we see, the world that is apparent, and another world is really like the ground that we're navigating. And that ground, like it's either shareable or unshareable on the basis of what we are, like our systems of ordering or our systems of orientation. And so, yeah, I mean, I just really feel always misrecognized. And I think at some point I understood that misrecognized, because often when you're misrecognized, when I was misrecognized, the impulse was to correct, to be like, no, that's not what I'm doing, that's not what I'm saying. And actually I started to realize that in that misrecognition was, that actually was where the possibility was. The possibility didn't exist in you know, Fanon says they're opposed with no possibility of like a higher unity. There was no possibility for me in trying to like convince people about what I think I'm doing. In fact, the fact that they saw something else in it allowed me to continue doing what I felt was important to be done. And that's why I'm here. That's where I'm going to lead at.
Well, thank you both, Belinda and Nolan. Thank you, Emily, for inviting me, us, and Liverpool Biennial. I hope you all get a moment to go to Liverpool while it's still summer. We are running until the 12th of September. We have another public program in August from the 4th till the 6th, which is called the Middle Passage. And we have Santiago Moslin coming and Campbell X coming to show their films. And oh my goodness, my brain just went blank. But artists from Trinidad, Trinidad who's coming to show a film. I can see her name in my emails, but I cannot say it with my mouth, which is horrible. But you should come because she does this amazing work where she's looking at Disney as a political fantasy and what that means for the real world. And she'll be talking about her work. Yeah, and there will be Guadalupe Maravilla doing an offering with his disease throwers. And Unmute will also be coming to do a public realm works performances. So please come through and come chill with me and the friends I've made. And we attend to uMoya, you know, breath, wind, air, spirit, soul. Yeah, Togozani, and have a wonderful day.